Hey, what is up, everybody? Thank you guys for joining tonight. This is not First Friday, even though it says First Friday on that graphic. This is actually Speed Dial. And this is actually episode 31 of Speed Dial. I didn't realize, this has been going on for quite some time now, and it's really kind of exciting that we've been building an audience, and I've been able to get so many great guests on this show. Normally, I do Speed Dial from my house with my phone because I want to keep it simple. But tonight, because I have a special guest, I thought I would kick it up a little bit, do it from here in the studio using Wirecrash and with drones around me and all that good stuff. But tonight, we have the chief pilot and senior product specialist at DJI. Now, I first met this guy through being able to do a little bit of pre-testing of DJI products and was able to get some help from him on some different things. But I mean, you talk about somebody who has to have a lot of confidence in what they're doing and be really good at something, because it's kind of like being the chief coffee maker at Starbucks headquarters, right? If your coffee sucks at Starbucks headquarters, you're probably in trouble, even if, depending on your opinion of Starbucks coffee. And if you aren't a good drone pilot at DJI, and especially being the chief drone pilot, that says a lot about this guy. So his name is Donovan Davis. I'm going to bring him in right now, and let's see if we can make this all work smoothly. So Donovan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I just want to also make sure, guys, in the chat, I want to make sure that you're hearing both of us okay. So you guys hit me on the chat and let me know if audio sounds good, etc., if anybody's too loud. But Donovan, really appreciate you joining tonight. I know you have been super busy with all of the launches that have been going on recently. I know there's a lot associated with that. How have you been doing? Have you been keeping pretty busy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of challenges, but we've been able to keep to our schedule of continuing to release new products throughout the last 18 months, and it's definitely been challenging. But we're all pulling together, and we're very happy that we've been able to continue doing that through various challenges.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because the pandemic obviously kind of changed a lot of businesses, some for the better and some for the worse. Online retail, like online shopping, is huge right now. How did it really impact you guys, other than the day-to-day impact of not going into the office or having to wear masks or whatever? But as far as the sale of drones, did the pandemic really take you up or down, or can you say?
Yeah, I mean that's not really my department, but I don't think that it negatively affected DJI really at all, from kind of what I heard through the grapevine. But its sales numbers aren't really something that I'm privy to or that I focus on that much. But from my feeling on it is that no, it didn't. I think people actually maybe got more into drones and camera systems and gimbals and stuff. Because a lot more people were home, a lot more people were trying to find ways to feel like they were able to still go out, and what better way to do that than to be able to fly.
Yeah, and that's, it's funny. Last summer, I had flown FPV since 2016, but had never really gotten serious about it. I was a pretty mediocre pilot, and I still am not great. But last summer, I decided, because I had a little extra time on my hands, I went out and did 10, and also because DJI's digital system came out, and that was a huge change for me.
Sure.
It was a big game changer as far as wanting to get out and fly. But I did 10 battery packs every day for a week, and man, my flying went from really kind of sucky to pretty decent, and it made a big difference.
Yeah, the 3 packs a day challenge, the 10 packs a day challenge that a lot of guys do, it's a huge difference because people spend a lot of time, especially early on in FPV, building and doing small tweaks with flight controllers and that kind of stuff, and not really fully just getting into the flight experience. And that's one of the great things with DJI FPV is that you can kind of just jump right into actually flying. Not to take anything away from the joy of building and soldering and programming flight controllers and stuff, but if it's really just about the experience, which is what DJI FPV was designed for. To be able to have each step that you can take from simulator to full manual flight, kind of planned out, and just spend time doing that. I think we're going to see a lot of really cool, interesting things because there's so many more people now that have the ability to go out and fly and create and fly in really interesting acrobatic ways. I think we're going to see a lot more really cool FPV content.
Yeah, and certainly I know the DJI FPV is a huge step for people who want to get into flying it. But real quick, I want to say thank you to Charles for the super chat, $10 Canadian. So I'll go buy myself some poutine or some maybe some Canadian bacon. Thank you, Charles. And I will be shipping you those ND filters, by the way. And then thank you to my brother Brad. That's awesome. Thanks for joining tonight. Super chats aside, Donovan, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up, and what were you doing as a kid? Were you into RC and that sort of thing, or is this a new thing for you?
Yeah, I was definitely very into RC. There's a lot of kids in my family, so we didn't have a ton of money. But my dad actually bought me a control line. Gas powered.
Yes,
it was like a plane on a kite string.
Yeah. I had one of those.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was my first intro into sort of model aircraft. And
you would tilt, like you would have to tilt the handle up, and it would pull a string, and it would tilt the rudder up, and then you got really dizzy.
It had because you had to spin in the circle as the aircraft was flying around you. And it literally had a plastic handle with 2 strings that came out of it. And if you tilted your wrist up, the nose would go up and you would ascend. And if you tilted your wrist down, it would go down. So you just basically did that until the little Cox gas motor ran out of fuel.
Yep.
And then it would just
about 3 minutes of spinning in circles.
Yep. 3 minutes of intense, terrifying joy. So that was something I did with my dad. And the day that he bought it, we put it together. It was like a little kit at that time, like balsa wood and this little heavy motor and all that. And he crashed it right away. And then we spent the next week or so rebuilding it and buying parts and stuff. And then I finally got to fly it. So my journey with loving model aircraft started there. I think it is for a lot of people, with my dad. And I'm the first person in my family to ever actually obtain a pilot's license, a manned aircraft pilot's license. And so it's just something that I've always really loved and really been into. So as I got older and into my teenage years, and I could afford to actually buy radio controlled aircraft because through the 90s, it was a really expensive hobby. And especially because I was really into helicopters, single rotor helicopter stuff. A single crash could set you back months.
My brother-in-law flies those, and he is just crazy, and he's really he kind of looks down on stabilized drones. He's like, that's that's not flying.
Yeah. No, of course. Yeah. I mean, that's, I still have my friends that look down on stabilized drones, the OG guys. But I have to say that if it's about experiencing flight, I definitely would not trade in stabilized RC aircraft, because it's just opened up a whole world to so many more people. I mean,
Absolutely.
It took me probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 years just before I could really competently fly, a single rotor RC helicopter, and not just try to hover it and be terrified the whole time I was going to crash and then spend the next 2 months rebuilding the thing.
Right.
So the joy of flying, you definitely had to put your time in at that period. So I did that throughout my teenage years, and I got into 3D and some competition stuff, and I really just loved that. But I spent just as much time rebuilding as I did flying. And then I got into the film business when I was in my early 20s and in Los Angeles. And I spent 15 years as a dolly grip. For those of you who don't know what a dolly grip is, it's the guy that's his primary responsibility is moving the wheeled platform that a camera and a
smoothly. You got to move it smoothly.
Exactly. So that's what I mostly did, and I really loved doing that. So when brushless motors evolved, flight controllers evolved, it was kind of just the perfect fusion of my skill set, camera movement and RC aircraft. So it was like, there was a no-brainer for me to kind of move into that. I was actually, prior to multi-rotors becoming a thing, and what we now refer to as drones, I was putting, small cameras and DSLRs on single rotor helicopters.
Wow.
And flying them around and trying to get, smooth shots, which was very, very challenging.
Oh, I'm sure. And there wasn't built-in EIS either at that point, or
no.
It was all just how you flew. Because I can remember actually attaching a GoPro to a Phantom 1 and trying to get with no gimbal, right? It was just on the belly of the thing, and trying to get smooth shots with that. And the way I found it worked best was if you put it into what they were calling ADDI mode at the time, took it out of GPS, and it was a really calm day, and you would kind of you would zoom like one direction and then let go of the stick and just let it kind of, that was when I got the smoothest shots with it. I even had a prop balancer, because I remember trying to get those props like so perfectly balanced so that there was no shake in it or anything like that. And now you can fly in high wind with I look at these props are so beat up, and I'm kind of a miser with the props. I use them till they're pretty much dead, and it's still, the footage and the smoothness of it is still just off the charts. It's
it's definitely, that was definitely the dark ages, and I loved it, trying to figure out ways to make it work. But from a professional standpoint, it's all about the shot. It's all about being able to get that smooth cinematic shot. And with a single rotor, like a 700 size single rotor helicopter, you could find a sweet spot, for like 10 seconds.
Right.
Where it would finally smooth out for 10 seconds. And you could, hopefully what you were trying to film was in the frame for that 10 seconds where you could actually get a smooth shot. And then, even the ability to stabilize in post hadn't really evolved yet. So there were just so many challenges that made it incredibly difficult and really tough. So I remember when the Flame Wheel was originally released. And the Phantom 1, those were game-changing, moments, just to be able to have an aircraft, which I, of course, immediately tried the same thing you did, which was, how can I get a GoPro on here? How can I make it work? And then, of course, around the time that the Phantom 2 was released, and then the H3 2D gimbal, which is really what changed everything, because that was the first time that anybody could just put a GoPro on, and if you flew Phantom 2 in GPS mode, you could actually get a pretty decent, pretty smooth shot.
Yeah. That was. I remember ordering the Phantom 2 online, and with the gimbal, and just being so excited about that. Not having to deal with the prop rotation and and just a quick funny story about the Phantom 1. I have a friend who lives up in Dallas. He was down in Austin, just for the day, and he had never seen, like everybody that I was friends with, as soon as they came over, I'd say, you got to see this, so I'd go outside, we'd put the Phantom 1 in the air, and, I'd show him all the stuff. Anyway, I told him you can't push it over. It's just because, it was pretty locked in. They all have been. He goes over and just takes the landing skids and just pushes it, flips it upside down, and just crashes all over the sidewalk. And I was like, oh, I guess you can push it over.
I guess you can. Yeah.
If you push hard enough, but so then like you said, perfect storm. How did you end up actually at DJI? Did you have another drone business or drone job before that, or? Yeah,
so I was messing around and Phantom 1, Flame Wheel, and then like these really ridiculous, massive single rotor helicopters with these very rudimentary pan and tilt sort of remote heads. It was this whole thing we were trying to create. And then I figured out through a friend that DJI had opened an office in Hollywood, and figured out like, oh, this is the company that's making these incredible little multi-rotor aircrafts. I'm going to go. And I literally went and just knocked on the door. At that time it was more like, it was just kind of opening, just kind of becoming a thing. And it was more like a sort of a shipping hub. It hadn't really become a thing yet. At that time, one of the managers of the marketing department just happened to be walking out for lunch that day. And I just interrupted him and said, "Oh God, I love your products, and this is what I do." And we started talking about single rotor and competition stuff, and essentially that's where it all began. I was hired as a test pilot at that point, just to test new products and beta
like right stuff. On the spot. Did you get hired, or did it just that was getting your foot in the door?
Yeah, that was just the foot in the door. I think it probably took a month or more of just kind of us talking back and forth. And he would say, "Oh, we're testing this new thing. Why don't you come out?" And a lot of it was, like a lot of prototype stuff would come from China HQ just in boxes, just in pieces. And at that point, like not a lot of people on the US side even knew how to put that stuff together. So I would get a call, like, "Hey, can you want to come fly this new prototype?" And I, of course, would be like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'll be right there." And I would get there, and then they would say like, "Well, you got to put it together."
Right. And the instructions are all in Mandarin.
Exactly.
So good luck.
Because we have no idea. So, here's a box of parts and put it together. So that's kind of how it all started. And my experience in the film business, obviously I saw an opportunity there to really start creating these beautiful aerial shots. I started my own drone company, which I did simultaneously while working back and forth with DJI. I think the first product video I did for them was the S900.
Okay.
And so, which I think is still on the website somewhere. You can see me in like my old school DJI blue T-shirt flying in Malibu. The first S900 prototype that we had just put together out of a box.
And that had the lift up landing gear, right?
Yeah, it was the spreading wings.
Spreading wings. Yep, I remember that.
That's actually why it was called that, because the landing gear would go up on those little servo actuators. So the S1000 was the bigger one.
Yep.
And that one was pretty much to carry, I think at that point was, what was that? The S900 was, I think, designed for a GH4 at that point. And then the bigger S1000, it could carry like a larger Canon camera at the time.
Like a 5D or something.
The only real difference. Yeah, exactly. It was, I think that was a Mark II, a 5D Mark II, I think.
Yeah, around that time.
At that point, yeah. Anyway, so not to spend too much time languaging in the past, but yeah. So that's when I kind of came in, and I just really I saw the potential, and I really loved anything that flew, and cinematography was a really big part of my life at that point. Still photography was a big part of my life, and that was just everything just came together in the way that it hardly ever does in life at that moment, and the rest is history.
Well, and again, you kind of, it sounds like you were sort of in the right place at the right time, because when some of that early stuff was coming out, it was really, DJI wasn't a household name. I mean, even today, people who aren't into drones know of DJI. It's kind of, they might not understand everything they make, but yeah, that's awesome. So how many years have you worked there?
That would have been 2012, but I didn't stay on there. And so I came back 2 years ago, so I've been back full time for 2 years. I was always in and out from 2012 forward.
Okay.
So
And so you've obviously had drone work with all kinds of different drones, and you said working as a dolly grip on movie sets. Have you done drone work on commercials and movie sets and stuff like that as well?
That's what I primarily did between 2012 and when I came back to DJI a couple years ago. Was I ran my own drone cinematography company, and that's most of what I did was feature film, music videos, TV shows, and in the early days, a lot of it was just everybody trying to kind of figure out how to do the stuff legally. There were just so many hoops.
There's a lot of just do it and ask forgiveness, not permission kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was one of the first people to get my own 333 exemption, like as an individual, not as an organization. And that, it did open some doors, but it was so restrictive that there were just so many hoops to jump through. Yeah. Like 107 changed so much in the ability for pilots to be able to actually shoot, especially in an airspace like Los Angeles, which is so crowded and complicated.
Yeah.
It was super challenging, not only to navigate the stuff at the FAA, but also, insurance companies, studios, and all of that. So I was lucky enough to get
unions, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, man, you're not part of the drone union. You need to have this guy shadow you.
Right. Like that's a whole other discussion, because there's still it really hasn't been concreted as far as, what unions are doing what. Like there's a lot of drone guys that are aerial cinematographers and they're part of the camera local. I think that's probably the majority of them, local 600.
Right.
But you have, the grips in local 80 also. There's drone guys in that local because they're all IATSE unions. They're all sort of under the same umbrella. I think they're still, it's 8 years later, I'm still trying to figure out how this is all going to work for drone people. It's definitely, been challenging.
Well,
a lot of people
you should form the drone union.
I have thought about it. I'm a little busy, as you know.
Yeah. Not like you don't have other stuff going on. Well, so the question I wanted to ask you, if you have an entertaining story about whether it was the toughest or most interesting, or involved pissing off Christian Bale or something. What's a good story from your movie set or commercial set days?
Sure. Well, that's always an interesting question, because toughest, there was a lot of shoots early on that were very physically, demanding. Like, we did like a Bear Grylls show one time that involved a lot of, hiking up the, rappelling and stuff that we were not really prepared to do, didn't understand what the job was.
And if you had only had the DJI AIR 2S at the time, it would have been much easier, right?
Yeah, it definitely would have been easier than, laying down on the side of a rock face and like handing this, drone up the side of a face, hand to hand, like climbing this mountain.
Wow.
So there were a lot like that because, nobody really knew. We were writing the book on how to do this stuff. So what you would need to get a drone to the top of a mountain, a lot of producers thought like, oh, well, it flies. Can't you just fly it to the top of the mountain? But if you didn't have line of sight.
Yeah. Where are we going to land it?
Where are we going to land it? We didn't have PV cameras on that. A lot of that stuff early. A lot of it, was 100% line of sight flying.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were, DJI flight controllers, but early versions like a NASA and the A2, that stuff was just kind of coming into everybody's awareness. But most of the big drones that we used to carry cinema cameras were home built.
Yeah.
Where you were dealing with a flight controller that was reliable most of the time. You were dealing with motors from one manufacturer, ESCs from another manufacturer. Soldering on set was very common in those days. There was always something to fix.
They called it SOS.
Yeah, exactly. And you had all of us trying to figure out what video transmitters were going to work and how we could get control reliably to camera operators. There was just so many things that needed to be figured out. But I was lucky that I made a lot of friends in the film business, and there were a lot of us all trying to kind of figure it out at the same time. So I was able to get on Captain America 3, I think.
Nice.
And that was, I think, the first time that Marvel used a drone, at least in the U.S. And that was like a big deal because it was this one explosion shot that we heard through the grapevine that it cost like $4 million for them to do this one shot.
Wow.
And we were the main camera.
And you forgot to put the SD card in.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Didn't you put the SD card in? No. So we went out to Atlanta and to the Marvel Studios, which I think the paint was still drying on those studios at that point. It was like the middle of nowhere. They built their own studio, and it was top secret. We had to sign a stack of non-disclosure agreements, and you're sort of vetted and whatever. But the gist of it was they had built this giant blue screen that if you stood 100 yards away, you couldn't see around it. This thing was just massive. And it's for this shot where Iron Man flies in and shoots these missiles, and these airplane splits in half, and then a truck blows up. It was this big deal.
I can see why that would cost $4 million. I mean, first of all, you got Iron Man, a truck, an airplane. I mean,
absolutely. So, they had flown us out 4 days ahead of time. Me, my good buddy Jake, who was my camera operator at that time, and a tech, because the post effects guys, like the way they do it on Marvel shows is everything is not only planned ahead of time, but a lot of times they actually create animations called animatics, which show exactly what they want to shoot. So that is incredibly helpful for anybody that's trying to figure out what the shot actually is. But it also has a lot of pressure because exactly what you cannot screw up. Like you have to be able to get the shot. And so they flew us out 4 days early just so that we could continue to run the shot over and over and over again so that we had it perfect. And I think at that point, it was the first time that I had been asked to fly a very precise altitude, airspeed, angle. Like they really wanted it locked in. And as you probably know, like at that point, drones, they didn't do that stuff very well.
It was a lot of drift, a lot of
and GPS was somewhat reliable. Anyway, so when it came down to actually do the shot and the air raid sirens are going off, the directors decided that they didn't want that shot. They wanted me to do a different shot in a different spot, which I ended up having to fly backwards over this construction crane. And I'm flying just line of sight, no FPV, and just hoping that I get the shot perfect. And I remember asking the pyro supervisor, the guy that's responsible for blowing everything up, like how big the explosion was going to be. And as a dolly grip, obviously, I had been on many film sets over the years with a lot of explosions, so I was kind of used to the idea of it. But it was unnerving to kind of look around when the air raid sirens were going off, and there's nobody else out there except me.
You're there by yourself. And would there have been an opportunity for a second shot, or was it just one and done?
That was really what created all the pressure. This was a one and done.
Wow.
So I mean, they did have ground cameras down there for safety and to be able to capture other angles. But the way that it was communicated to us was, it's you guys. You are the shot that we want to use. So don't screw this up.
Wow.
And so the pressure of doing that, knowing that you can only really do it once, that there's no reset, and just of course, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I want to get everything right. But at the last minute, after we've been rehearsing this thing for 4 days, and I'm just now feeling like, okay, I got this. We've been flying this thing. My camera operator's confident. He knows what he's doing, where he's going to be. We've got like this synchronicity going. To then right at the last minute have them decide they want us somewhere else doing something else.
Of course.
But
that's the client, right? I mean, that's what clients do. It doesn't matter what industry you work in, whether you're in construction or film. The client's going to change it at the last minute. Oh no, wait. Can we move that? Can we move the bathroom to this side of the house, please?
Yeah, exactly.
So got to tell us how it went.
Yeah. So we roll camera. And I hear the countdown.
What was the camera on the drone, by the way?
That was the Red Dragon.
Okay, so pretty expensive camera.
The camera of choice at that point, and I think it had like an $80,000 lens on it. But at the end of we were kind of used to that kind of stuff at that point. But The real pressure was just we got to get this, and it has to be perfect. So we roll the countdown. I know that the explosion is going to be coming, but now I'm no longer looking at the explosion. My back is facing the explosion because I'm flying over myself to be able to get this shot and keep line of sight. And so as I'm flying, I hear the explosion, and of course I have my fingers on the sticks. It's Mode 2 Futaba 14SG at the time was what I was using to fly. And I remember thinking, like, just don't twitch. Like, no matter what happens, just
don't care how hot this explosion gets.
Exactly. And at that point, I think attitude mode at that point was definitely the right choice, because GPS would not have done what I needed it to do. So it was about getting the drone moving and kind of following that momentum forward, and then letting it kind of coast, not over controlling. So you're thinking about all this stuff as this countdown is happening. And then I'm turning just as the explosion hits, and I don't see it, but I can feel the heat, from the flames, and hear the sound. And I'm just, don't twitch. And I'm turning. And by the time I turn, all I see is this massive plume of black smoke, post-explosion now, no flames, just black smoke. And the drone, and this is a big old X8 that, we built, just flies into this giant plume of black smoke and just disappears.
Oh. And so you're line of sight. So you can't, you have no idea where it is now.
Exactly. So it's the only thing you can do at that point is, okay, full reverse on the elevator stick, maintain altitude, hold the throttle stick where it is, and I pull it back. And I wish to God somebody had been filming this, because on a Marvel set, nobody can film anything. They take your phones away. It's a big deal, right? So nobody was able to film this. But what actually ended up happening was the smoke created this vortex where it parted, and the drone just pulled out of the smoke. It was
almost like an angel
shot. Like, if somebody had filmed that, this would have been like the ultimate, website shot.
Yeah.
The company. So I bring the drone back out. We come in, we land, and I still don't know, did we get the shot? Is it okay? So I come in, I land, and the first AD is behind me, and he says, "Hey, the directors want to talk to you." And it's two brothers that direct the captain, or at least it was at that time, two brothers that direct, super nice guys. But I don't know, if I'm being called into the Video Village tent to be told that you screwed it up or great job. So it's
no context in the PA that came to talk to you, just straight face, right? The directors want to talk to you.
Nothing there. I look at Jake, and he looks at me, and I'm like, okay. So I walk into the tent. I got this big monitor set up, and I can sort of see the shot running in playback. So I'm trying to look through people to see what it is before I get there. And I walk up, and the directors turn around, and they're both smiling. And that was the moment where I realized, okay, cool. It must be at least good enough that they're smiling.
Yes. That's step one. Dang.
So I walk up, they show me the shot, and it's perfect. It's the perfect line. The explosion happens. There's no twitch. It's exactly the angle they wanted, and they're in love with it. And of course, I have to play it off like I wasn't nervous at all.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's why you hired me, because it's perfect.
Yeah.
But that definitely will be the shot that sticks in my mind as the all-time most epic one, because we had a lot of challenges with technology. We had motors fail. We had arms we had to replace last minute. Like, that's just how it was at that point. Reliability was pretty difficult then. So we've come a long way.
And if you had, you didn't expect that smoke to come out, right? The shot was done by the time it went into the smoke. At that point the shot. Okay, wow.
Yeah, the shot's over, and that footage even would be pretty cool to see. Which,
absolutely,
is in a Marvel archive somewhere, of just the explosion happening, and then this black smoke plume that the drone flies into. I mean, that probably looked incredible on camera.
Yeah, you can imagine too the rotors causing that vortex that you were talking about, almost like your hands doing this, like you're swimming
exactly.
to get out.
That's kind of what it looked like. It looked like a thick black curtain that just somebody pulled, and then the drone kind of was revealed out of it. That's the only way I can describe it. It was just this incredible thing that I wish to God somebody had been filmed. No.
Well, man, I'm reading the comments here, and everybody was on the edge of their seat during that story. I want to just say thank you to Joe Blaylock, and I saw another super chat down there. Thank you, Joe Blaylock. And the second one was way down here somewhere. Ben. Oh, Ben from Austin. Thank you, Ben. So that kind of pressure obviously helps make you a better pilot because you learn how to deal with it, right? You learn how to keep from having that jitter.
Right.
I'll tell you, I'll make this really quick. I remember one time I was shaking because, and this was really dumb, I used to do a video for a summer camp that my kids went to in the Ozarks, and we were doing a shot that was kind of choreographed of someone going off of a zip line and doing some flips and stuff into the water. And it was like, we only got one shot at that. And I remember just like I was a little nervous about that. I was like, and I think this was actually a Phantom 2. So it had a gimbal, and I had Fat Sharks hooked up to it with a, what was the transmitter that would work with the Fat Sharks? The Immersion RC.
I
had Immersion RC hooked up to it so that I could see, but it's all grainy, it's analog. Anyway, and I was nervous about that, Yeah,
I mean, the best training that I could have done to be a cinema pilot is single rotor. When something goes wrong with single rotor, you learn, or at least I did, and I've talked to other pilots about this. You find a way to suppress adrenaline.
Yeah.
And because everybody feels it, like any pilot that says oh no, I just don't feel adrenaline is full of it. You absolutely feel it, but there's sort of this way that you kind of hold it in until the aircraft's on the ground, and then your hands start shaking. Then you start breathing.
Yeah. And then the next day you get an ulcer.
Exactly.
So we were just talking about. I was mentioning about the that shot with the Immersion RC and the Fat Sharks, and I think those were like Dominator 2s or something.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a minute about analog versus digital FPV. I mean, I was telling that story about flying for a week, 10 packs every morning down at a field, and really what got me wanting to do that was my first experience with the DJI FPV. The unit, the transmitter, and the goggles, the V1 goggles. I mean, I had done a little bit before, some tiny whoops, some home builds. I had this really big clunky 4S home build that my buddy Jason and I built years ago. But until you put on those digital goggles and you can see everything so clearly and nothing drops out and you really know where you are, that inspired me. Now, a lot of companies are going digital, and I know that DJI has partnered with Cadix to do the Air units, or at least the Vista units going forward. I don't know too much about what's going on with that. There's lots of speculation, but all of that aside, do you even have analog goggles anymore? Do you still fly analog ever?
I do. I still have my Fat Shark goggles. I think it really, it comes down to what you're doing. Like 95% of what I'm doing, the clarity is the priority, and the experience is the priority. I mean, I'm not really racing, and so that's really where you would see a difference in, for some pilots, they would say, like, yes, I can still tell there's a little bit of latency.
Like Mr. Steele, right? Mr. Steele always gripes about latency of digital.
Yeah, I think that the people that are at the top of their game and they're the fastest guys in the world, their brains operate on a level, their synapses fire on a level where they can tell the difference. Yeah. And I think for those guys, I don't think they're full of it. I think they're being honest that they can feel the difference.
You know what it is? It's a high midi-chlorine count.
That's got to be it. Yes. They're feeling the force in a way that most of us are not.
I appreciate that you got that.
So yeah, for those guys, I don't know that they're ever going to want to give up their analog. For everybody else, though, if it's about the experience of flight, not only being able to see power lines and little branches and all that stuff, but just the immersion of being there, feeling like you are flying. I just don't think that there's a way to compare that. That's really that experience for me only really exists in the digital.
And even the original DJI goggles, and then the race edition, which I still have, those were pretty mind blowing because they were such a big immersive screen. You just got this kind of full view of what the camera was seeing. And no, you weren't doing crazy gaps and spins and rolls and all that stuff, but you were seeing exactly what the drone was seeing. It was pretty cool. Yeah,
it's incredible to think, how far that technology has come. I mean, all of the drone technology and how far it's come, but that original goggles. You remember the giant, how big they were? It was like this huge thing that would sit on your head.
Yeah, and they folded up. That was really cool. I really liked the way they kind of folded up.
I mean, I don't know how cool we looked, but it was cool that it.
Dude, if you can look cool in any FPV goggles, you're a much cooler guy than any of my friends or me, because they are nerdy AF, if you know what I mean.
Agreed.
So Zebmeet, by the way, he said interesting mess, which is a good way to describe my show. I appreciate that. Thank you. One quick thing. You did say that some people will always stick with analog because of the latency. It'll never match. But don't you think digital will get there? I mean, or do you think is it one of these physics thing where it's impossible for digital to be low latency?
I mean, I the people I think that have experienced DJI FPV, the clarity of it, I think they've already seen sort of a half generation forward. So I don't think that it's a physical limitation. I think that the tech will continue to evolve to the point that it doesn't really make a difference as far as latency is concerned. But I feel like for some pilots, they're always going to, whether just because that's what they're used to and they're more comfortable with, they're always going to feel like 5.8 is just faster by that millisecond or whatever.
There's at least one guy in the chat right now, Doc Murdoch, who still flies analog, and he's got it dialed in, so it looks almost like digital, right, until you get too far away. But yeah, and he's told me that same thing, and I still am like, I can't see it. But speaking of FPV and digital and stuff, I want to just hit a little wait, let me do this real quick. I should have had this ready to go. How about this guy here?
Right.
So this has been out for what, 3 months now, 2 months now? Not too long.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly I think it's selling well. It seems to be really popular. A lot of people are trying FPV for the first time. But that growl, like, I remember the first time I heard it, I was just, that is so cool. It's cool in a nerdy kind of way, honestly. Right. But you said you had a story about that growl. What is the story behind it?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes into sort of the ethos behind the FPV, which is, it's about the experience of flight, right? And But there's also a little bit of attitude with
badass.
FPV. I feel like, it's kind of badass, right? So, the DJI FPV, something that is very close to my heart. I spent more time with that product probably than any other product we've ever released. So I have a lot of warm and fuzzy stuff about it. And I started working with it, 18 months before it was released. But
do you have prototypes? Do you have any prototypes sitting around that you can show us?
I have barrels and barrels of prototypes.
Just out of reach of the camera.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And I think a lot of people think that if you're a pilot that works for a company like DJI, that you just get to fly drones all day. And there are days where you do fly drones all day, but it is very much a methodical kind of process when you're testing betas. It's not always a good time. It's work, a lot of times, just trying to figure out how to create this experience and working with bugs and back and forth.
Oh yeah, you gotta be thinking a step ahead. Like, what am I not thinking of? What could go wrong with this? Especially when you're dealing with something that could be potentially a safety hazard, right? I mean,
sure. Yeah.
You're not dealing with an iPhone that basically won't work or will work. It's something flying through the air that's relatively heavy and has some mass. So I am often blown away by that, and I've seen little things in some of the early versions of software from DJI or other companies even, where there'll be a typo or there'll be something that doesn't quite work, and I usually try to send it in if I'm one of the people testing it or whatever. But they're so small and so few and far between, those little things, that all those things that have been thought of, I mean, it's like you could just draw this matrix of millions of lines going out in every direction, and those are all the things that you have to think of when you're developing something like this. Yeah,
I mean, that's very true. I mean, that's kind of true for any product that any company wants to bring to market, like figuring out how it can be the most valuable, how it can suit the most needs of the most amount of users. FPV was kind of it's had its own like special place because it wasn't something necessarily that was just about the next drone, or how can we make the most money with the next drone. I think that there were a lot of people on the DJI side, me included, that really loved the hobby, that really loved FPV, that spent a lot of time doing it in their off time, in their personal lives. And so much of that love, I think, actually made its way into the product. Yeah. Because without that, without the understanding that the engineers that were testing this, the engineers that were coding for it, that were designing it, the people that actually flew FPV, that actually love the hobby. And when that kind of love goes into a product, it can only make it better. And the people that are designing something, and this kind of leads back to the growl, is, that's why it growls, because all of us on our home builds, when we figured out that we could program different sounds into our, into our ESCs, it became like a joke at the airfield of, what theme song, or, is it going to be Star Wars? Is it going to be some dorky sitcom that is it going to be the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air that comes out of this drone? It became a thing that we all loved and thought was hilarious. And so with FPV, that growl is specifically kind of an homage to that the camaraderie of that idea, that when it starts up, it shows that it's got a little attitude.
Yeah. And so I don't know that everybody knows this. I mean, I think a lot of folks in the chat will know this, but I learned this. I have a buddy named Eric who's a electrical engineer who told me this, and it blew my mind. Actually, he was the first person that ever had the Phantom 1 that I got to see, because they worked on gimbals for a number of companies. And at one time, I don't know if you remember this, but DJI was North America was headquartered in Austin. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So I've met all those guys, and it's a whole other story, right? But he told me that the ESC, or the drone coming on, that is mechanical vibration. So can you explain a little bit about that? You were talking about like tuning it and stuff like that. What is going on when you can explain it better than me, when you turn a drone on and you hear the doo-doo-doot or the da-da-da-da or whatever?
Right. So sound is a frequency that, when we speak, we've learned to create certain sounds by manipulating vibrations, our mouths and our throats, right, to make different sounds. Well, it's the same with the brushless motor. You can program essentially a vibration frequency into a motor to have it create a different sound or a different tone or whatever that is. So it's very much by design. That could have made the DJI startup sound. It could have been, the traditional sound that we're all used to from the brand. But I think that it was important that this was distinguished as something new, as something different. That it's still growling in a startup tone that's reminiscent of the branded DJI Doodle-Doot startup, but that it's actually, like, someone actually had to, there were a whole discussion had to go into that. Programming time had to go into that. Multiple people had to agree that this was worth.
Frank Wang had to put his stamp of approval on it. I'm sure.
I guarantee you that Frank Wang had something to do with that startup sound. That he thought it was cool. And so much what I love about the product is that it only exists because people think it's cool, because engineers love it, because Frank loves it, because I love it. I don't think there's a lot of consumer electronic products that exist more so because of love than economics. And believe it or not, FPV is one of those rare products.
Well, so I had Rick Smith, who's with Drone Valley, on this talk show last week, and he and I were talking, and of course, you've got your haters, right? Everybody's got their haters. I don't know how many thumbs down I have on this. I had a thumbs down before we even started the show. Okay, thanks. But whatever. There's also the love, and there's a lot more love than there is hate in this group, at least. But what I was saying to Rick, and I had this sort of aha moment about this guy right here, and that is, when I got this, and I got it early, which I really appreciate. Anytime that happens, I'm a happy camper. It's a lot of work, to review this. Like you were saying, there are days that feel like work when you have to go out with an early drone and figure out how to make it do something. But it's work I want to do. It's work I enjoy. So I got this. It's an aside. I got this. I was surprised at how big it was, at how much technology was in it. Honestly, I was expecting a small 4S ducted FPV drone with a carbon fiber frame. And I wasn't disappointed. I was fascinated. But and Brad Alston said lots of love from us. Thank you, Brad. But here was what I said to Rick, and this just was like an aha moment: is if you love it or you hate it or whatever, it is different, right? You guys did your own thing. If you had come out with a carbon fiber frame that looked just like a newbie drone or looked just like a GepRC or any of the other guys out there doing this, you would have just been a Me Too. But you decided not to be a Me Too. You did something completely different and unique, and that's like art. People can love or hate a movie, right? The best movies, a lot of people love them and a lot of people hate them because they're sort of polarizing. So anyway, I'm on a bit of a rant, but
I agree. I mean, I think that if I had to break DJI down into sort of an ethos or a brand, it's that it's taking complicated technology and trying to make it invisible, so that what you get to focus on is creation and experience, right? So there were a lot of different, as you imagine, prototypes. There are a lot of different versions of DJI FPV, a lot of bigger, smaller, faster, slower, cinema, like all of that goes into development. All of that stuff. Like, I don't think people have any idea how much time and work actually goes into developing a product like this, but it's a ton, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So, all of those discussions have happened. All of those discussions have been on spreadsheets and meetings and PowerPoint presentations and all of that from here to across the ocean. That happened for a long, long time in bringing this product to market. And what you have here is a product that best allows that ethos and best allows people to experience flight without having to build, solder, program, or anything, and trying to give people, a rate profile so that they can tweak and customize to their needs. Once they get a little bit more familiar with it. But if you think about the way the product's designed, it is for people who are like, God, I really want to know what that feels like. Who see the Instagram, who see the YouTube videos, like, wow, this guy's flipping and rolling and he's doing all this awesome stuff and flying so fast. I want to know what that feels like. I want to know what it's like to fly 80 miles an hour, like that sensation. That's what the product's about.
Yeah.
And so all of the decisions that were made were about creating that being the priority, that being above all else. Like, there's always going to be people that like, oh, if it had, if it was more like a Cinewhoop, if it was smaller, if it was, I mean, those things are all still possible. And the more people that ask for that stuff, the more people that send emails, the more people that post about on Instagram and YouTube, like, that is your voice. So if you want to see something like that, if that's like, we love to hear that information, like all the YouTube stuff and all that. I love when people say, oh man, I really wish it did blank. Like that goes in a note for me, and that maybe doesn't make it into this version, maybe it doesn't make it in the next version, but the more people that show that there's a need and a want and a love for something, the more likely it is to come to fruition. So like, post about it, email about it. It actually does make a difference. The manufacturers are paying attention. If you guys want to see a Cinewhoop style FPV, don't let go of that idea. Talk about it, post about it, ask for it. That does make a difference. No,
I mean, certainly you guys are listening, and all the manufacturers are listening. Just like you said, it's today with social media, it's stupid not to. I wanted to mention two quick things, Donovan. HM3 gave a $10 super chat and said, here's to piezoelectric technology. So I think he was calling out what we were talking about, the vibrations.
Yeah.
And then you said you often note what people request. I saw a chat with the request, and that is Tater Rogers wants the thing to say "yeah, baby" when it boots up. So if you could get one that says "yeah, baby,"
Yeah, I
Tater.
mean, I definitely have been asked about that because of the growl. Like everybody wants to be able to record their own startup sound.
Oh
So
yeah. Kind of like
that's
a.
definitely
But
that's
then
in
that's
my
not really piezoelectric anymore at that point, right?
no
That.
that would be recording and playing back, a simple sound. It's not as cool as piezoelectric, but you got to give the people what they want.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, I want to run through some questions that people sent in. I've been asking lots of questions. Are you good on time for like another 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
I don't know if I'm supposed to be able to see the chat or not, but just wanted to let you know I don't see a chat.
Well, you wouldn't be able to see it. Here, I'll email you the pop out link real quick.
Oh, got it. Okay.
You wouldn't be able to see it in this, but let me just email you this real quick. Maybe you can regale everybody. Well, I'll ask you a question, then I'll email it while I'm answering the question. The first one, and this was asked multiple times, has to do with compatibility of this guy, the new Air 2S, with the goggles V2. Mm-hmm. So what do you got to say about that while I email you?
I can say that it's on the development schedule. It is a planned feature, so stay tuned. And I do think that is going to happen. Obviously, the disclaimer when I'm on anybody's anything is I speak for myself, not for DJI. But my instinct on this is that will happen and relatively soon. Cool.
Yeah. The next question, and we were talking before the show about the fact that the smart controller, for example, didn't work with the original Mavic Air 2 at first. But I'm saying the Mavic Air 2 at first, but then that was an upgrade, right? It's a software thing. And so I think part of the reason that companies hold off on that sometimes too is they want to release a product at a certain time for whatever reason, but it might not be ready, and it's better to wait and do it right than to try to rush it and make it not work.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I mean, there's so many wheels spinning, in a big tech in any big tech company. But any feature requires resources and testing, and people to go through it and figure out what's wanted and what's needed. And so, like, we are not going to release anything unless it's ready to go, or as ready to go as we can possibly make it, because nobody wants to be a beta tester, for a technology company. And if we had just thrown out something that kind of worked, the amount of people that would have been upset about that, greatly exceed the people that are like, why isn't this ready? There's so much that goes into doing that. Like I had a beta that I was testing for 8 months of the smart controller compatibility with Mavic Air 2, so it could have just been dumped out there. But until it was actually ready and was able to pass the standards that we needed to pass, that's why stuff sometimes is delayed until after product release. And one of the big benefits of a company like DJI, the size of DJI, with the experience that DJI has, is that they do actually listen to what people want. And anybody that's has history with DJI knows that through firmware updates, a lot of wish lists and wants and needs do get answered. Yeah, and that's not something that a lot of companies have the ability to do post releasing a product.
No, and I think that's the nice thing about software too, right? Is if you write it the right way, it can be updated, down the line. But I think that I do personally. I think that compatibility with goggles, cross compatibility between FPV and camera drones is a really cool thing with the same set of goggles. Because right now you're kind of limited to one or the other. I mean, right. I don't consider this a camera drone, right? This is an FPV drone with some cinematic capabilities, but really from an FPV perspective.
Absolutely.
The next question was from Ray, and he wanted to know what's the most common drone used in law enforcement, or do you see certain drones being used in law enforcement a lot?
So DJI has an enterprise department that specifically deals with firefighters and law enforcement and utility companies, that kind of stuff. And I have some good buddies at DJI that do that. I don't specifically work in that department. My focus is consumer side and the pro side. But from what I've heard over lunches and stuff with the guys, is that originally the Mavic 2 Zoom was, I remember a lot of what they liked because it wasn't about, like Mavic 2 Pro obviously had the Hasselblad optics and the 1-inch sensor and all that. But the ability to zoom in from a distance was something that obviously the
an optical zoom, right? So it's a real zoom. You're not losing quality. You can still see really well.
Exactly. So in being that I haven't really done a lot, that information may be outdated at this point as far as what law enforcement likes. Like they could be really into Mini 2, because it's so small, or who knows at this point. But I do remember initially it was Mavic 2 Zoom was the drone of choice for law enforcement.
Okay. As far as we were talking a little bit earlier about the Air 2S and the f-stop. Now, Chris asked about the ability to change the f-stop, and you and I talked a little bit about this briefly before the show. Yeah. Can you kind of explain the explanation? Because it is a fixed 2.8 f-stop on the... Okay. Yeah. So this is not a variable aperture. It's a fixed aperture at 2.8, as you pointed out. And so it's not... You have the ability to change your exposure through variable shutter and ISO. And then there's different technology built into the drone itself that's going to help you get the best image possible. But as far as adjustable aperture is concerned, you're only going to see that on Mavic 2 Pro, Phantom 4 Pro V2, and of course Inspire 2 at this point. So the cool thing about Mavic Air 2, DJI Air 2S, see, even us, we're still doing it. Yeah.
Is that it's the real impressive part is that they were able to get a 1-inch sensor in a drone fuselage that size. Yeah. Because that's never been done before. And where you're really going to see the difference there is in low light capability, because that's where the larger sensor really shines. Yeah. So there's a lot of discussion about megapixels and the Air 2 versus the Air 2S. And really what it comes down to is megapixels is going to give you more clarity individual pixels. So for instance, if you take a still picture, your ability to blow it up before you start to see pixels, that's where megapixels comes in. But that's not going to give you any benefit in low light because the sensor is smaller. So you can't really just compare pixels. You really have to take the entire implementation of the image processor, the sensor, the optics. Like there's so much that goes into how these drones are able to capture these incredible images. But the simple answer is it's all about implementation, how all of those factors are working together to give you the best image quality possible.
Yeah. So it's and also the interesting thing about f-stops and ISO and all that is they're all kind of carryovers from the film days, right? So really what we're talking about is electronics that are simulating what a real camera, I say a real camera, a regular traditional, SLR or moving shutter kind of camera used to do. Right. But actually 400 AGL joined us. That's Mel. He had a great question, and I meant to ask this. And actually Brad's asking the same question about the Mavic name. So, obviously the Mini is now the DJI Mini 2. Mm-hmm. This one is now the Air 2S, and I was saying Mavic. I had to do so many retakes on my video because of that. But I have a theory about that, and I'll tell you my theory, and maybe you can just nod your head. Is that there may be a new Mavic coming out somewhere down the line, and that'll be kind of reserved for that flagship, and then the other offshoots of it, which have a similar body style, will have different names. Can you nod your head?
That was a nice try, Carrie. Whether or not Mavic 3 would be called Mavic 3, or if there will be a Mavic 3 or when, I can't speak to that. What I can say is that I think it was about clarity, about brand clarity more than anything else. So that because for a lot of people, like you said, who are not necessarily into drone, but they've heard the name DJI, they might think that Mavic is the manufacturer. They might think that Osmo is the manufacturer. I think that's, and again, this is my personal opinion of why this name change happened, is because it's important to DJI for people to know that all of these products are DJI under the same brand. Exactly.
It's like the Apple iPhone or the Apple iMac or whatever.
So, as also products evolve, the model names tend to get longer. And so, the DJI Mavic Air 2S, that is a huge mouthful, right?
Yeah,
So I think more so than anything, it was just about simplifying everything. And for the rest of us, it's just about getting used to calling things that we've been calling for years now something else. But I think eventually it'll catch on.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and I could see where from a branding perspective that would be a good move. So there's the answer we have. Whether that's the real reason, only Frank Wang knows. So, as far as, let me see my other questions here. What's your favorite drone in the DJI lineup? I think you already answered that, but I'll let you answer it again.
I don't know how satisfying this answer is going to be. My favorite
you love them all. Which
What's
kid
that?
is your favorite? It's like if you have kids, which kid is your favorite?
Right. Which kid do you love more?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I would say that because I've literally spent thousands of hours flying it, Inspire 2 will always have a very special place in my heart. And still to this day, it's kind of the workhorse throughout the industry. So I would have to say Inspire 2 is my favorite overall. However, there was a prototype that we built called Storm that I don't know if a lot of people ever actually saw it.
No.
I think there's only like 4 in the world.
I like the name.
And Beijing Studios has, I think, all of them now. But that drone was a heavy lift drone that flew like an Inspire 2. And I absolutely was in love with it. So that would have been my all-time favorite DJI drone, even though it never made its way into production.
Brad Henderson had a great question, and I think it might be for both of us, and I'll answer first. Do you keep your old drones or move on and sell? I do a little bit of both. I mean, I still have a Spark, and I still fly it occasionally just to remember, because it's really a fun little guy to fly. But I sort of have a limited amount of space that I can keep them in, and so when I start to run out of space, I typically give them away on my shows, as if you guys watch. As a matter of fact, I will be giving away a drone on First Friday, which is in 2 weeks. So not going to say which one yet, but it may be one that a new model recently came out of. So just saying. But how about you? Do you have a backlog personal collection of drones, or you pretty much don't even own any because you can get to them anytime you want?
I mean, I don't know if you can see behind me on the shelf there, but I have, there's half a dozen of my FPV builds and a bunch of other stuff. I typically what happens is when the batteries I have, I'll fly a drone until I can't power it anymore.
Right. The batteries. It's like they just won't hold a charge anymore.
Yeah. Or what I'll do is I have brothers and sisters and friends and people that I brought into the hobby. So a lot of times I'll do my own version of a giveaway, and family and friends end up inheriting old drones. But I have quite a graveyard and quite a museum of drones. Yeah.
Who wants to mow Donovan's lawn? Come on. First one gets an Inspire 1.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Well, that's awesome. So the next question was, with Cinewhoop's huge payload drones and now tiny drones with good quality cameras like this guy here, the Air 2S, what do you see being the future of camera drones evolving? Do you think that we're going to go really big, or do you think things will just continue to get smaller, or what's your take on the future of that?
I mean, I think the trend in all electronics is smaller, and I think that as cameras continue to get smaller, and we're able to kind of continue to get smaller or larger sensors into smaller drones, that's what you're going to see, because it just makes more sense. I think the skill required to fly the big boys and the danger factor in a lot of the heavy lift stuff, I think that it's really, for most people, it's about the product. It's about the quality of the product. And this Air 2S that we're talking about now, is producing a 5.4K resolution product, and it's
it's tiny.
It's this, right? Yeah. So, I mean, not that I'm forecasting trends, but I think that what we've seen will continue, which is cameras will get smaller. Brilliant engineers will continue to figure out ways to get those small sensors onto smaller and smaller drones. But we're going to get to a point where a drone has to be a certain size to be able to fly well, to resist wind. Brushless motors will continue to evolve. DJI certainly isn't going to slow down in developing and innovating. And so That's what you're going to see in my opinion. I think you'll also see, in the industrial sector, you'll see stuff happen more on the heavy lift side because they need to carry the LiDAR payloads and the heavier payloads.
I mean, the delivery drones, I mean, that's going to be a thing.
Yeah, we'll definitely see that, I think, in the next decade for sure. Drones buzzing around and dropping packages off.
You think we will?
Yeah, I think so. Or is
it going to be like the flying car? Like everybody thought it was coming and then it never happened.
Like in the 50s, everybody thought by like 1980 we'll be flying around. No, but I think that will be very limited in its scope. Like those drones probably delivered no heavier than a 5-pound package, and so which is I believe I read an article that said Amazon, that's like 90% of what people get delivered is under 5 pounds. Yeah. So I think that's viable, and the technology will continue to improve and become safer. We'll figure out the airspace stuff. And so I definitely see that the delivery drone thing, I think that's absolutely going to happen. And then as far as cinema is concerned, really it's about the glass, for cinematographers. It's those big heavy lenses that they love. So I don't see heavy lift going away anytime soon, but it is comparatively such a small market. I hope that people continue to innovate and continue to create heavy lift products to carry. Yeah,
and they're kind of specialized, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like Catalyst, who am I, down in Houston, who am I thinking of? They make the Money Shot. Have you seen that one?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I can't remember. It's Catalyst something.
Machine
Works. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, the Money Shot is a great example of that. Like
very niche. I doubt they'll make more than a couple of hundred of them.
Sure.
I mean,
but that's what I'm seeing on every car commercial now. That's what I'm seeing is that technology coupled with the red Komodo. Which is now, this camera that is, the camera that I could only have thought about in my dreams 5 years ago. That's what made that viable. So now you can fly these incredible acrobatic FPV shots reliably. Obviously it still takes a lot of skill to do that. But we're not having just, ESCs fail and motors fail and drones drop out of the sky. Like it's actually a reliable product.
It's a Karma or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's my rim shot? Hold on, I gotta hit the rim shot here. There we go. There. So I got to go on set with Nurk one time, probably about 6 months ago, end of last summer, when he was flying the Money Shot for a promotional thing for Catalyst Machine Works. It was awesome. He was chasing rally cars, and but I was filming with a Mavic Air. I was like, I'm glad that's not my responsibility. You talk about nerves. Also wanted to just say hey to Jerry. I think it's his birthday. Thank you for the super chat, Jerry. I should be super chatting you if it's your birthday. But
happy birthday, Jerry.
Yeah, and so just a couple of other quick questions, and then we'll wrap up because I know we've gone a little bit longer than expected.
Sure.
I asked you this earlier and you answered, but for everybody in the audience, do you see DJI getting into the 360 camera space?
Again, I'm
your own opinion.
I'm speaking of my own opinions here, my own feelings. I don't, what I say doesn't speak for DJI, but I don't see that as being something that would focus a lot of attention on, just because there's not as much of a commercial want or need for it. There's also not a lot of consumer people asking for it at this point. I'm not saying that it couldn't happen, but there are niche companies that are starting to manufacture that we talked about before the show. But I don't see it as something unless a lot of people started asking for it and using it in interesting ways. Like the tough part about VR and 360 stuff is that I was flying VR cameras 5 years ago, on drones, and did a lot of really complicated, really difficult stuff to fly. And it was always a bummer because I would never see the final product anywhere.
Yeah, it's very niche. The number of people that actually got to see it were a lot smaller.
Like, what do you do with it? You put it on a website and somebody can click on it and kind of look around with their phone. So I feel like the product of VR 360 hasn't really come to fruition yet. Like we don't really know how that's going to be. It just hasn't really become what it could be yet. And so I think that might have to happen first. like the need for the product needs to be there before the product.
Well, and that kind of leads to, I told you before the call, I ordered the Newbie drones. So I have a Newbie drones Vivid Frame 6S that I love, absolutely love it. I ordered the new invisible drone. They have a invisible drone with the Insta360 1R built into it. And what I want to use it for is I'm really trying to get into doing more of these long form shots that, the bowling alley thing that everybody went crazy about a few weeks ago. That's actually funny. I've gotten some calls to do that sort of thing since that video came out.
Right.
What's your take on all this stuff that's going on with these long continuous shots and FPV?
Well, I mean, we've been doing them for a few years now, and it's kind of been like a bragging rights thing that just goes around a smaller group of pilots.
Right. Did you see that?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that.
Here, hold my beer.
Super impressive. The ability to, have that venue and to be able to have so many people that were involved in creating that incredible shot, like that's such a rare opportunity to have somebody that, to like all of us it would be a dream just to get a shot at doing that kind of shot.
Right. Because you have to have an interesting story, right? And so that space had a lot going on. You could follow the bowling ball. You could go back in the back. You could go by the bar. I mean, that was. It's funny because a buddy of mine just recently filmed a music video using a Cinewhoop, and we were talking about it, and he said, "Yeah, the footage looks great, but it's kind of boring because there was no audience because of COVID. It was just the band playing on stage, and so." You have to have that story to go along with it to make it work, right? And that's what I think that's eventually what's going to come together is the storytelling with the because I've seen a lot of those FPV shots. They're really just about hitting the gaps, right? It's just like, wow, you hit some sick gaps, way to go. Sure. But what was that all about, kind of thing. So.
Yeah. But being able to do like a long oneer where everything just comes together in the right timing and the right rhythm. Like, you can see the amount of people that it took all to be into that idea and be willing to do something fun and cool. Like that's something that now is kind of coming into the mainstream. I'm like, you mentioned Nurk earlier. Nurk and I are buds, and like he is one of the best pilots in the world.
Yeah,
that's why he was a world champion racer. He's flying the money shot, as you mentioned.
Yep.
And he is one of the pioneers of those long, one shot, type of flying.
I mean, I feel like Cinewhoop was. I don't think he came up with the term, but the first time I heard it was from him.
Sure, of course, yeah, and that's that willingness, like the skill set, is obviously what it is. You have to put in, I would say, hundreds, if not thousands, of hours to be able to get to a NERC level, if you could even get there. Because a lot of that I think is also just raw talent.
Yeah, midichlorians.
Like midichlorians, exactly. Like I've been flying FPV for 5 years solid now, and I'm not even in the same league as somebody like Nurk, but to be able to just go like, what, God, I'm going to get all these people together, get permission for whoever owns this bowling alley. I'm going to fly around, the back through there and see what's back there and all the mechanic. Like that takes vision and cooperation and excitement, and like I think we're only going to see more and more of that. Yeah, I'm super excited to see what people come up with, especially as cameras get even smaller. Higher resolution. Yeah, I mean the Insta360 Go 2, right? I was putting that onto a pretty smaller, much smaller than most of the 6S or 4S Cinewhoops, like a 3-inch or a 4-inch little Cinewhoop, and you can get great footage with that. It looks amazing. Well, 3 years ago, I was flying my crappy little Cinewhoop that the only footage I could get off of it was the 5.8 feed.
The DVR, yeah.
Exactly. And now naked GoPros and the Cinewhoops and like the size of the drone that was actually used to get that shot. Like just that technology is making these incredible shots possible, and that's only going to continue.
So you did mention, and by the way, I don't know if you're seeing the chat, but lots of people are thanking you for joining tonight. Really,
I never clicked on the link you sent me.
Oh, well, there you go.
Thank you all for thanking me. I appreciate it. My pleasure being here.
So of course, Ready Set Drone, Nurk. What other YouTube channels do you enjoy watching? Is there like a knitting channel or woodworking? Or
you putting me on the spot here is I'm just going to forget somebody, and as you can imagine, I know a lot of YouTubers. So it's better if I just don't plug anybody so nobody can be mad at me. Technically, I sort of plug Nurk, but at this point, I'm not gonna say anybody else because I don't want to forget anybody.
Well, Nurk's just a good guy, so
he
he definitely deserves to be plugged if anybody does.
Absolutely.
Well, hey man, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time. What an opportunity. It's funny you mentioned about DJI listening. I didn't. When I asked my contact if I could reach out to you, I wasn't sure if this would be a yes or a no. And last year I remember before Spin Up, which is are you familiar with Spin Up? It's a event that we do every year, and DJI has been a sponsor.
Yep.
You've heard of it. Okay. So and you'd be a great speaker at Spin Up, by the way. Just saying. But when I
so like this stuff is never like I'm never forced to do any of this stuff. This is
no. I just didn't know. I didn't know if you'd be allowed to. But what I'm getting at is I am really impressed that DJI let you do this. That there wasn't a don't do it kind of thing. Obviously, there's a lot of things you can't talk about, and you do this a lot, so you're used to it. But I do think that DJI sometimes gets a bad rap because they're the big guys. They have the biggest target on their back, And yeah, of course, every company has their faults and such. But generally, my experience with the customer service, my experience with the products, my experience with every person I've met has been very positive. And I think, if we didn't have somebody out there blazing a trail, we wouldn't be where we are today in this hobby.
I agree. I mean, that's the thing is that there's people like me, in a company that's the size of DJI that are here because they love to fly, and that's what it's about for them. And I'm at DJI for the same reason that I went and found their shop in Hollywood all those years ago.
Yeah, you love the tech.
They're the guys that are doing something that nobody else is doing, and I wanted to be a part of it. And I feel like we're still on the forefront of doing that.
I don't remember who it was, but Steve Jobs famously told somebody that he was recruiting to come to Apple. I think he was like the head of Pepsi at the time or something. He's like, "Do you want to make sugar water or do you want to make history?"
Right.
And you guys are making history.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think everyone here who's doing this right now is making history. We are the aviators of our time, right? We're the kind of people who are out there barnstorming and learning all this stuff and making it. But anyway. Well, I really appreciate it again, Donovan. It's been really cool. I will definitely let you know about Spin Up. And for everyone who's watching right now, I do have some updates coming on Spin Up for the next First Friday, so be sure to tune in there. Donovan, any final words before we call it a night?
Keep flying, fly safe, and have fun. Thanks so much for having me. It was absolutely my pleasure.
Cool, man. Good to see you. Thanks for coming on, and everybody out there, fly safe. Take care.
All right, guys.
When I fly, I won't fly alone. I'm gonna fly with Ready, Set, Drone. 'Cause Ready, Set, Drone will always fly with me. Flying fast and flying free. Flying with friends is the life for me. 'Cause Ready, Set, Drone is my community. Goggles and rotors and FPV, props and motors and ESCs, gimbals and cameras are what we use to fly. Sharing stories and swapping tales, amazing triumphs and epic fails. How will you know if you don't ever try? Ready, set, drone, ready, set, drone. Spin up your props and plug in your phone. Fly with us and we think you'll agree. Ready, set, drone, ready, set, drone. What's the point of flying alone? Flying with friends will make you feel so free. I won't fly alone. I'm gonna fly with Ready, Set, Drone. 'Cause Ready, Set, Drone will always fly with me. Flying fast and flying free.